So, hello everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak at the Wireless Technology Summit for the Americas and the Caribbean. I am Maria Myers Hamilton, the Managing Director for Spectrum Management Authority of Jamaica. Today, we're going to be speaking about trends and technology shaping the future of Jamaica's ICT industry. And more importantly, we're looking at 5G and what to expect with the new technologies, innovations within the region, but more importantly, what we see in Jamaica that's occurring based on our analysis of the market space. So a little bit about us, Spectrum Management Authority. We are the regulator of the radio frequency within the Caribbean. Our vision and mission statements are very clear in front of you. We really do things in accordance to enabling, sustaining growth of wireless communications, and through effective regulations and customer-oriented or customer-centric, I like that word better, services that foster social and economic benefits to Jamaica and its citizenry. Our mission, therefore, falls in line. We have to ensure that the spectrum RF is efficiently managed and ensuring that we're keeping with international standards, and that speaks specifically to the ITU community, which we are a part of. A little overview of the company. So the company, Spectrum Management Authority, or SMA, as the acronym is right there, was formulated under the Telecommunications Act of 2000. A year after we began our operations in April of 2001. And prior to that, the management of radio frequency was under the Post and Telecommunications Department of the Ministry. And at the time, it was Science and Science Technology on the key roles. Now, we're not look at all our roles because we have a number of them, but our key roles here is really planning. And this has to do with the assignment under the National Frequency Allocations Table, the NFAT. And then we have license, of course, of RF spectrum. The monitoring and compliance unit within is primarily our engineering team, who is in the field ensuring that the paid spectrum users are actually getting free and clear spectrum without interference, and investigating any interference if it ever occurs, and ensuring that we are adhering to our international obligations. And so, for example, there might be cross-border interferences that we also have to actually manage on a timely basis, especially when it involves a member state or one of our neighbors. Spectrum licensing fees, we collect these fees for the spectrum for the government of Jamaica. And of course, we are the technical advisors for the government of Jamaica for radio frequency under the Ministry of Science, Energy, and Technology, and primarily in the area of policy, legal issues, all again concerning how RF is managed. Now, if we take a look at the digital landscape, this map is actually looking a lot better than when we looked at it in 2020, when the pandemic hit the shores of Jamaica and the world, of course. We found that there were many persons who did not have access to LTE coverage. Now, the map is showing a better picture, but we're still not out of the woods. If you notice, we have pretty much most of the island covered, as you see, the served with showing green, and the underserved, which is really the technology now of maybe 2G or 3G technology for the underserved, and the unserved is nothing at all. And this is in the area now in the eastern part of the island, and there is a small part, which is a little key off the coast of the parish of St. Catherine called Goat Island. But again, work continues. So although this data is based on 2022, I'm sure, a number of the areas, the yellow areas in particular, and even the red area in the Portland area has been, improved. Sorry about that one. Now, if we look at global traffic, and this again within our space, at the time where we're seeing, like in the 2000 previous years, 2020 to even 21 and earlier parts of 22, the consumption was around 5 gigabits. Now, based on what's happening with trends, and especially coming out of the CES and the mobile shows that we've seen, the use of the technology and the innovation is going to be far greater. We are anticipating an increase of maybe close to 25 gigabits per user per month. And now we're using very low tiered uses like texting, but I see over time things will change. Now, when we look at bridging the digital divide, we have to look at some primary drivers. We have to look at affordability, availability, and accessibility. Because bearing in mind, we are a country of 2.6 million people. So we're not a huge country, for example, like Brazil, which is in South America, or even the Americas. We are a small island state, and this is where the Caribbean has its challenge in terms of affordability, availability, and access. Now, how do we manage to bridge these gaps? So the 4 pillars of action to really tackle those three areas that I mentioned previously is maximizing the existing assets in the field, like tower sharing agreements, pole attachment agreements, delivering shovel-ready projects, looking at projects that are out there in the field that government and private and public sector partnerships can be actually materialized, incentivizing the investment in broadband and cellular infrastructure. And in fact, we did this quite recently over, I think it was in 2020, between 2020 and 2021, when we did the auction of the 700. And we actually discounted that value, gave certain terms and conditions for them to roll out in areas that was underserved and unserved. And again, trying our very best to modernize government. We also improved on pricing. I believe we actually did a very good job at looking at how we actually price spectrum in a very meaningful way. So again, we're trying to, to ensure that the market has little or no entry barriers to sustain the flow of innovation and entry. And we have seen this, like with the entry of Rock Mobile, for example, which was the new entrance in that auction that took place with the 700. In addition, we see like an IslandNet, for example, they're growing very steadily and as a very solid ISP, doing fixed service solutions across the island and getting into the interior. NWA, National Works Agency, of course, is a government agency. They are doing very well. They're rolling out a broadband network across the island to connect public schools, the different offices of the government, to ensure again that we are meeting our target of being a digital ready to society. ReadyNet also is quite astute in that they were one of the first companies to bring satellite system solutions to our island. Because when we had the challenge again with the pandemic and communities were not reached, especially the interior, we had to use satellite technologies. And through Viasat and ReadyNet, we achieved a number, I think over 150 schools were touched. Flow has been that steady person in that market space. They've been around, rebranded from Cable and Wireless to Lime, now to Flow. And I believe throughout the region, both Judicial and Flow are the key players within the Caribbean space. So all these persons are working, collectively in terms of trying to bridge that digital divide. Now, if we look a little bit on the evolution of the wireless spectrum in Jamaica, we have to take a step back and look at the why. Why do we do what we do? And if you look at the sustainable goals, the 17 sustainable goals, we're trying to eradicate poverty. We're trying to improve upon the actual, divide in terms of access to technology. And with this on the horizon, there's economic development. We have to address that. The social challenges, the change, because we know we have to shift the change. Recall I said before, we still have a level of low-tier technology taking place where people are really consuming the use of a wireless device to do basic things, texting, a video call, but we want to move and shape that behavior now to more a productive one. And then with more technology, we have to focus on security, and cybersecurity is a crucial element in terms of when we move more into technology, you have to know kind of harden that aspect of the environment that we operate within. And of course, again, the impact of current regulations, because a number of our laws have been written in the past, and now we would have to look futuristic and future-proofing the regulations. And one thing I can mention to you in terms of spectrum reallocation, we are looking at and got approval of taking a portion of the 600, which is really allocated for broadcasting. We're looking to take a portion of it to give it to International Mobile Telecommunications, IMT, that they can now expand their reach and have more spectrum for more power, maybe machine-to-machine technology, business to business, or even business to consumers, depending on the nature of the consumer, because again, we're shaping a behavior. This will actually dovetail to new mobile network technologies for 5G and 6G. Again, COVID was a very bad thing, but the plus side, or that silver lining, is that we saw this implosion of a digital economy within the society. We saw not only the Internet of Things, we saw machine-to-machine communications taking place. We saw a number of things, remote medicine, persons doing quite a bit of just telecommunications, conferencing. We are seeing some degree of virtual reality and augmented reality in the schools, in the universities, being taught and being used. I believe they have a digital cadaver at one of the universities in Jamaica. But more and more, I think for example, the hospitals, the spaces that can use AI and VR, AR needs to embrace it a little bit more. And I think that is to come. That's on the horizon. And of course, with all of this, global harmonization is absolutely critical. And that is why we have our meetings as it relates to CITEL, our ITSO meetings, and our CTU meetings, of course, which is the Caribbean Telecommunication Union meetings. CITEL, everyone knows, because it is Latin America and the Caribbean, and the Americas, sorry, and the Caribbean meeting as one. And ITSO now speaks specifically to the satellite communities. And I believe we represent 3 islands within the region when we sit at those meetings to talk about satellite. Now, capacity can be increased in 3 ways. We can replace it with older technology, of course, and put in more efficient infrastructure. Cell sites, the telcos are doing this right now. They're improving on the use of their spectrum. They're using more spectrum, but in a more efficient manner. And possibly we could also look at even offloading of data. And again, a topical item on the agenda, I know, is Wi-Fi 6E. which is something that we're having that discussion as we go on, and it's on everybody's table to look at in a big way. But finding more spectrum has always been an issue within the ITU space. Even before WRC 19, as this slide said, the 1200 megahertz for IMT spectrum was identified as to harmonize in Africa and Europe in region 1. Same thing is happening now with the new spectrum identified at WRC 19, the 17.25 gigahertz for new millimeter wave spectrum. Yet no additional spectrum is we're looking for additional spectrum again. Looking at the agenda items, I believe there are over 58 documents that we're looking at the last sitting of the PCCT 240. And 41 is coming up, and I'm sure, again, we're going to see IMT asking for more spectrum. And again, we'll see where that goes. So how will Wi-Fi be possibly developed in this space? Now, the ITU has classified 5G into 3 categories: enhanced mobile broadband, ultra reliable and low latency communication, and massive machine type communications. And on the screen, I've just demonstrated, in a little bit more depth what each of the areas. So the EMMB will tackle the high band services that will make the digital life better. For example, I would say, the automation of a port where, you find a lot of services that can happen in a secure space, like automated vehicles. I would not say automated vehicles will happen in Jamaica, on the roads of Jamaica, but in a controlled environment, that I see that happening. So for the next 10 years, we would like to see homes, possibly, displaying all the PCs. And now we might see a fridge, for example, having a screen, or you find that a lot of the appliances within the space will have, a display switch. And we saw quite a bit of that at the last CES when we went. And of course, human to machine interaction with a voice or voice over, like we have I think it's ChatGPT, which is something that is very popular, even in Jamaica. A number of the schools are looking at it. So again, it's really increased access to a cloud-based service where everything is a screen scenario. So we're going to see a lot more focus on cloud-based services. And again, the regulation will have to change somewhat, especially in the government environment, which does not really support data being stored in a cloud off island, for example. And that's one of the benefits with a cloud. You don't really want to store everything locally, although it's faster, but in terms of like disaster preparedness, you would have to store some of the data outside of the country. So there are some things that we'll have to iron out in terms of making this solution work. Now, as it relates to other areas, the URLLC, again, it's expected, that's focusing on just safety, connection of devices, environmental things. And again, as it says before, the need for low latency is very, very important, and the use of robots in a factory. What comes to mind is really, again, like what Amazon is doing. They're doing quite a bit of automation, and I'm seeing possibly our manufacturing sector looking at that down the road in terms of automating their whole solution and removal of that human element from doing that manual task to a robot moving things around, and a human is behind that, looking at the data and just making sure that there are no accidents, and safety is a critical component. MMTC now will enable the development of that digital society at a wider scope, the Internet of Things in the homes. As I mentioned before, everything is more interactive, from the interaction of what you watch on your television, your smart TV, to the fridge telling you you're out of something and connecting with your supplier or your supermarket to have it delivered to you. It's more of a connected system. You're wearing a smart watch, which will tell your doctor your vitals and that type of thing. So again, these are the areas that we have defined for the innovation to take place in the space, which is a good thing. So the commercial prospect is there, but then the very high speed, up to 20 gigabit, mobile, fixed wireless access, Internet of Things, transportation, connection of cars, as I mentioned, broadband for passengers on board the buses or even the taxis that they're in, healthcare, education, critical pillars. So how do we get to these things? Now, different bands have been considered, and even though at WRC 19, the bands for 5G were assigned, but as my engineers will tell me that 5G can operate in other bands. It's just how we look at it and how as Industry 4.0, how do you utilize what you have to become smarter and work the bands in a more efficient way and offload what you don't need to be on your primary network. So the MNO's investment are focusing really in the mid bands. The core 5-band spectrum is being assigned national with limited expectations. And again, this has to do with affordability, because I remember I mentioned before, the smaller states will have a challenge when it comes to the costs associated with the proliferation of the equipment that is required to carry the core, low latency 5G on a wider scale. So again, most administrations are expected to implement local licensing for the 26 gigahertz, the 5G Pioneer high band. Possibly we'll see that happening maybe, down the road after the next maybe 2 years. I'd say 24 months, give and take. Now, how disruptive is 5G in this environment? I'm going to say to you right now, the MNOs and the MVNOs, we're trying to even just stabilize LTE. They're just trying to make certain that they're maximizing, they have gotten their return on investment from the cost of the license that they've purchased over 10, 15 years. These licenses have been assigned to them. So they're just trying to realize this profit. And remember again, 2020 was a very crucial year for everyone. So it impacts not only the business side, but also the side where radios and the costs associated and availability of radios has also impacted the telcos in this region. Permits, and again, virtualization, cloudification and AWS private networks. We've seen some of that happening on a private wide scale, where persons are putting in these solutions, and then in a sense, the telcos are kind of not benefiting from this, because if an entity goes and comes to us and applies for a spectrum license and they qualify, then of course they can put in this solution and this cutbacks on their actual communication costs to a telco. So again, it's a give and take, and it's something that we have to balance as a country. Network sharing, I spoke about this previously. It's something that we see there is a benefit for network sharing and tower agreements. And we see this happening right now in the scheme of things. So what is the big picture? The margins, once they're 40%, now near to 10%, so they're making. The RPU is really flattening or declining. That's a reality. And again, it has to do with what has been happening over the past 2 years. So we have to now look at the telcos have to look at addressing new markets. Spectrum managers have to look at what services or what add-ons we can put into our pool of resources, pool of services and products that we offer. And the cons is the high costs. And again, what is that value that's going to be derived? It's something that we have to be very mindful. So what are the next steps? Possible opportunities for 5G in Jamaica will be market driven, because again, it has to be a demand and supply effect. The government cannot dictate to the telcos that they must put in 5G. But the good news is that one mobile service provider has turned off 2G, and the other is looking to turn off 2G and 3G in the near future. So that means they're moving on to using higher technologies, but again, it's market driven. So they have not prioritized the rapid rollout of 5G. This will happen in pockets, and the services have been earmarked are available, but again, it all depends on a market driven. So this is, as I spoke about this previously, of a solution where a port is actually looking at this technology, putting in a level of automation, removing quite a bit of the human element, and actually having retrofitted persons, operating cranes at a distance, and even the cars at a distance, which will carry the containers and load them rather than having humans involved, which is again something very new and different. This is something that is major, that's also going to help with the offloading of content on the network. We recently announced the adoption of the ADSC 3.0 standard next-gen TV in 2022. And TVJ, Jamaica, one of the larger broadcasters, TVJ Gleaner Group, adopted the standard, and I believe they have rolled out maybe 2 to 3 repeater sites in testing right now. So this is an IP-based standard, as you know, and the US, this is the US standard, and I believe Brazil recently announced that they're also using ADSC. And this is also a game changer as it relates to how now we're going to see a convergence of the utilization of different type of networking for different services. So the regulations that drive this, we're seeing now a convergence taking place of more local and cultural services. Database services are actually there. We have content providers, a greater diversity. We see now, the content is more personalized. There is opportunity to use the VR and AR technology, and again, extending coverage to more interior parts of Jamaica, because at the moment, a number of persons, because we're mountainous, don't have access to even the basic internet services, as I mentioned when you saw the map, much less good coverage of television. So this is going to be a game changer, especially with datacasting technology taking place. So what we'll have is this example where we'll share, tower sharing taking place, and then the transmissions now will be far-reaching from the TV station. You have homes, libraries, apartment buildings, and even community centers being served. So the datacasting really is going to be a game changer, and I see more now agreements being reached with telcos and maybe broadcasters, possibly, and improvement of just the whole experience. So you find they'll offload certain content, because people watch a lot of content, broadcasting content on their phones. And if we can, offload this to Wi-Fi, using Wi-Fi 6, for example, or even using the TV broadcast Wi-Fi spectrum, then we would be much better off. So digital terrestrial TV is something that I believe that will be enhanced tremendously with this new technology. So for the conclusions and observations, Jamaican stand to benefit economically and socially from the implementation of 5G and the new technology networks to come. It's just going to take some work in terms of our policies, our regulations, and us working together in all facets of our country, from the infrastructure in terms of, the National Works Agency to the parish councils who give permits, the buildings allowing the proliferation of the antennas, and even communities accepting that an antenna will be on a building or close to a residential area. And the activities of the major and important industries, the manufacturing, the agriculture, tourism, these are things that will be the drivers to push that whole mechanism of the innovation that needs to take place in the environment. And again, as spectrum management leaders, we have to be cognizant of all these factors in front of us: the multi-layered spectrum requirements, the backhaul support. Interference management is going to be a critical component in terms of how we invest and what type of analyzers we invest in and how we train our engineers to support the environment. The regulatory frameworks have to be shaped, like, for example, blanket licensing for satellite services, like the Starlink entered the market quite recently. And again, how their business model is set up, you have to give them a blanket license because they're always going to be reporting in the back end when they sell their systems. The coexistence of 5G and other services, as mentioned, not only with datacasting, but also with lower technologies, because LTE will be around for a while. And most important, as I mentioned before, the cybersecurity risks are something that we have to pay attention to. It has to be something on the books. And with that, I hope I've brought you some insight as to what we're doing as a nation, and know very well that we're doing it for the right cause. So again, thank you for your attention, and feel free to reach out to us anytime if any additional information is required.